Welcome to this episode of Life Science Success. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Don, and I'm a digital marketer in life sciences. With that, let me just bring in my guest here. Steve Jens is the managing partner of Jens and Associates. He's a global life science benchmarking and advising consulting firm specializing in strategic planning. So, with that, welcome, Steve. It's great to have you on.
Yeah, thanks so much to have me on and a guest. As we talked before, I'm used to hosting some podcasts myself, kind of in the regulatory space for life sciences. So this is a treat.
Always weird to be in the opposite seat for a minute, though, too, right? So
Yes, it is, and we had a recording today, this morning too. So
even better. Yeah, I in one part it can be a relief, but also you get that experience of other questions. But if you don't
yeah.
mind, would you just take a minute and just share with us a little bit about yourself and how is it that you found your way into life sciences?
Yeah, well, I've been in life sciences for about 35 years now, so I've stopped counting, and I started in the healthcare space, building hospital software, and then I had a quick stint, a couple of years in Waterford Crystal when they bought Wedgwood China, but I wanted to be in a larger organization and get different professional experiences, so I found myself at Johnson and Johnson. With Janssen. Janssen was very small, in J&J at that time, and I spent about a decade there. Had three different experiences. I was over on the commercial side, supporting the finance folks, some massive relocation as Janssen was growing considerably, and then finally, the last stage of it was very foundational with the Janssen Research Foundation. Really, the things that I do today, I would have never been able to with that experience in the Research Foundation. Then I continued on in consulting, a couple of consulting companies. Most people know Booz Allen Hamilton. I was in the life science, kind of practice there, a principal level, looking at both government health and also the commercial side, the sponsor side of healthcare, and then started Gens and Associates. I didn't want to stay in a larger company. Started Gens and Associates in 2005, so I can't believe it's 22 years, as we're going. And the rest is history. I had a laptop, cell phone, folding table, and within 2 years, some good clients, and 70% of the top 50 largest biopharmaceuticals in the planet in our benchmarks.
Well, I think it's interesting you talk about your background because not only is J&J a great place, and also Booz Allen Hamilton, as well, but also, I kind of looked at your overall background, like your educational background as well,
Yeah.
with both organizational development and then also with organizational behavior. I'm just curious, how has that played a role in some of the work that you do as well?
Well, it's been instrumental. And my undergraduate degree was business and mathematical computer science. So, kind of in my early days, like technology can solve everything, you just focus on that. And, it became apparent pretty quickly that it's all about people. I had experiences at Janssen, especially on the foundation, where we had very gifted people, highly credentialed, clinical teams, and some went to high performance and did amazing things, and others struggled or even crash and burn. So that kind of dichotomy got me really interested on more the people side, because we're all in transition, especially today. There's a lot of transitioning going on. So that found me to the OD degree, and really meant everything. When I go into client engagements, there's multiple lenses, so there's that diversity, and my whole team have very different degrees and disciplines. So some are organizational specialists, process, tech specialists. So, we go into any given situation and looking at that. And like an example in our latest research, because there's just so much going on, not only in the regulatory space where I play, but broadly, in life sciences, we call it the confluence of change, on this. And having that OD lens, we came up in the last piece of research with a future readiness indicator, and it's based on organizational agility and alignment, but just because companies that are high performing today does not mean they're going to be performing well in the future, because again there's just so much going on the digital side, health authority side, commercial side. It's actually really interesting times.
Yeah, and I would imagine though too, right? I mean, AI's at some levels got to play a role in some of this overall experience also. I mean,
Yeah.
I just think about I mean, there's so much where I feel like people want to pull humans out of things, but at the same time, there's a level that you
Yeah.
just can't. Not today.
Yeah, and you kind of struck a chord, on that because, in our benchmarks, and we do this large regulatory study, every 2 years. The one we just finished up was number 47. Again, the first one was back in 2007. And there's been a lot of terms of technology, although AI is really, different. If we look back at what has been game-changing technology, there's probably only four or five. Think about the personal computer, this thing called the internet, in the 90s, the cell phone, cloud computing, and now AI. And it's such early days where I just don't think, we can imagine just where it's going to be going. And I think, also on that people are jumping into it, but forgetting there's a lot of foundational aspects, organizational process. Everybody talks about data quality. You have to have good data to have AI do its thing. So, but it's a huge focus. We call it the shiny object.
Yeah, for sure it is right now, especially. And, some people, unfortunately, I feel like struggle with it in the wrong way. And then,
Yeah.
there's a lot of things that I feel like an organization like yours is going to continue to run into these things throughout the future. But I do want to come back to you. So if I look at your overall career journey, right? What were all the pivotal moments where you sort of say, hey, look, this experience really impacted me in a way that led me towards founding my own organization rather than
Yeah.
continuing to work with a larger one?
Yeah, and that's such a good question, and kind of really thinking through. There are just so many different experiences that mold and form, individuals' career, teams and organizations. But for me, it really comes down to two fundamental things. That last part of Janssen and the Research Foundation. And again, at J&J was great at rotations. First rotation, I was told, to do it because it's good for your career. Then I, learned very quickly having diversity of experiences. And I tell this to, folks that are just starting out their careers, that if you can get those horizontal, experiences before you try to go up, it means everything because your foundation's a lot broader. So I got that, with my last, position, and it was in running part of clinical ops. And I worked closely with the regulatory people. The little pause there. Sorry, it's when the first electronic submissions, were coming out. And Janssen at the time, the business challenge was our clinical trial volume was quadrupling in a very, very short period of time. So anybody that's on the clinical side, there's the last patient visit to database lock and then time to the filing. And our leadership at the time wanted to reduce that by 80%. So it was quite challenging because the challenge of that is everything was working well at that point in time. But people can imagine when you quadruple, and it's like a small, biotech that's out there, hundreds of them. It's about scaling, and scaling smartly. So everything changed at the process level, different roles, the impact on the organization, restructuring, and very, very new, I would even say, bleeding edge technology. We kind of applied at that. But actually, just working through and being a co-lead and working with some very talented senior leaders in J&J about how they guide, prepare the organization for the transition. And then my first consulting assignment when I went into consulting, it was, and I'm showing my age, it was a year 2K assessment. And it was my third day on the job. I was the only pharmaceutical expert, and it was for a pharmaceutical company. So I got to learn really quickly a lot of methodologies, good ones, in any good consulting firm. But the core learning is if you, again, having the right people, in the right seats with the right experiences, we did so much in a very short period of time on that. And that you can do amazing things if you have the right team. So I think those two experiences, were very, very foundational.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, I certainly could think back to my Y2K time as well. I mean, at
Yeah.
the time I had to go back to clients and talk to them about the fact that, look, we might come in as the year turns and all computers might stop. But it was an interesting time, I
It
think, for all
was
of us.
a simpler time too.
That's for
So,
sure. That's for sure.
yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about what you do at Jens and Associates. There might be listeners who might not be familiar with the space, and can you walk us through what regulatory information management means and why is it so critical in the industry?
Yeah, yeah. And we, this RIM or Regulatory Information Management, we did a first benchmark in it in 2012 because we knew things were changing in regulatory on that. So what RIM is, we call it, it's a capability and it's a corporate asset. Just if we think about folks in R&D, with the kind of the safety information. If you're an ERP on a manufacturing person, people in finance, they have their, financial information. And it's really the lifeblood of a biopharmaceutical, med tech company, because we're talking about the label, it's always time to the patient, but everything's on that label and that's part of the product. All the registration details in all the 150 plus countries, all the regulatory intelligence, people don't realize that there's hundreds of thousands of pages of data and documents, in what we call submission that goes into these 150 health authorities every day, and all the correspondence back and forth. So you're kind of getting a picture. It's that all that vital information, and then keeping products, compliant on the market, your safety reports, annual renewals, just all that information. So and you're dealing with all markets of the world, in each region, as has its uniqueness. So even though some of the processes are straightforward in regulatory, it's very complex because of the global landscape.
Yeah, and I would imagine that there's got to be a lot of very common things that you normally find whenever you first start working with an organization. So, whenever you
Yeah.
first engage with a new client, what are some of the most common challenges or blind spots that you tend to uncover in how they manage their regulatory operations?
Well, this is where the benchmark comes into play. Again, we do a very detailed analysis and we tend to have, 60, 70, 80 companies in it. So it's, especially for the large ones, again, 70, 80% of them in, and we might have 30, 40 smaller organizations. So the beauty of it is we know where everybody's at. And I would say one of the blind spots, people come in and they talk about some of their challenges as they're unique, and they're not. They're more, I would say 80% of it is common, challenges. So we look very quickly for, what's unique. And that's the beauty of the benchmark, because basically what we've done, we've automated the current state assessment. And that actually brings a lot of relief to clients about some of the, I say, 6 or 7 of their core issues out of 10 are common, and some are pretty straightforward to solve, and others are complex. And that's why they're a community issue. And we can get to work on things that are unique. I think the other kind of blind spot, and it's growing these days, is understanding how long it takes to transition an organization, especially the very large ones. That okay, let's get the plan. We're going to do this next month, next quarter, next year. So sometimes there's an unrealistic expectation about the cadence to do it right. So those are the two things we typically see, and we've seen it all over the years.
Yeah, I'll bet you have. I mean, I kind of chuckled whenever you said that initial part about, how people seem to think that their organization is unique because the
Yeah.
term I constantly am using is like, I feel like whether you're a medical device company or you're a pharmaceutical company, every
Yep.
company seems to think that they're a snowflake, and that snowflake is, absolutely in every facet unique. But then they also like I feel like the departments that we deal with, it's like as you go through each department, it's like this is why we're different than everybody else. And I kind of laugh whenever I think about, the fact that I've seen a lot of the same sort of peaks and
Yeah.
valleys in lots of different companies now, where I just go, well, look, you may think that you're unique, but let me tell you, here's how
Yeah.
some other clients are the same.
Yeah, and I actually have a really that brings up, kind of your comments, a really, fun story. So, one of my colleagues, Priya Bezek, she's based out of the UK, one of my process experts, we're in, and it was an agricultural company, and they have all the regulatory requirements like human health, and they were starting to get into human health. And they were really wary of us coming in as like, you biopharmaceutical people, you just don't understand our process. So this is after the second interview. And getting back to the benchmark, we had them take our benchmark, add some extra questions. So we knew exactly what was going on before we stepped foot into the building. But anyway, after the second interview, we had two interviews the first day, and we're like, you biopharmaceutical people don't understand us. So what Priya and I did, we just drew a typical regulatory process. If you're like to your point, if you're med tech, consumer, generic, medicinal type of thing. And we said, we wanted to make sure we heard you properly. Is this your process? They said, absolutely. I said, yeah, you and everybody else. So let's get to work. It just
Right.
brings your point home.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, it kind of ties to the next question I was going to ask you, which I think, falls in this same sort of category. Like whenever you look across like different therapeutic focuses or global reach or not, how do you deal with, different companies that are different sizes and things like that? Do you run into things where you just go, yeah, we're going to have to adjust here and there, but in reality, it's still the same, or do you really think they're fundamentally different in some way?
It's like yes and no, Don, on this. So, I always come back to our benchmarks because we have equal weighting, large, mid-tier, small, different product types. So we understand the nuances, if you will, between them. But if you think about, like three macro categories, the large tier, these are these large multinational. They're the big boats. It's hard to kind of turn things around. And, their life is dealing with complexity, right?
Mm.
So how do we simplify, how we reduce it? Doesn't matter what function you're at. So if we go to the opposite side, kind of on the really small ones, maybe it's first product to market. They're coming out of that clinical stage. They might be going from like 5 markets in the world to 60, which is really exciting. So the whole construct's about scale, and investing to the growth curve. And then the mid tier is kind of stuck in the middle because they're still growing, right? They don't want to have the complexity as the big one. So how do we grow and not put in the complexity? And that's why, like on our benchmarks, we have design sessions, especially for the very large one. And we have the small, the mid tier, and the large ones in, and they really kind of talk about their stories to make sure we have the questions right. And in any benchmark we've done, we have it broken out by tiers. We have, hey, if we look at everybody, these 60, 80 companies, these are the key themes, but they're unique. Some of those threads pull through all the tiers, but then to your point, you have uniqueness, and it's usually about scale and complexity.
Yeah, I just some of the companies that I've dealt with that are on the smaller size, I think it's funny to me how they try and hang on to that innovative part of themselves, and they try and keep the nimbleness that they had whenever they were smaller. But as
Yep.
they get bigger, they sort of start to understand too the risks that they're taking on. And
Yep.
normally the rigor starts to pile on, right? So you do start to see these things start to grow. But yeah, I mean, I could think of a few companies that have done a really nice job in terms of keeping some of their innovativeness in place, but at the same time, they have still the same regulatory challenges as let's say a mid to
It's a
large.
big one.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, absolutely. It's, maybe it's saying, what you're sharing in a different way. You want to honor what got you there culturally, right? But the reality is you're growing in complexity. If you have a small, a group, maybe there's 5 people in regulatory for a small, company. And like in Janssen, when I was in IT, I think I was number 14, hired, in IT. And like I said, my roles changed dramatically. And when I left 8.5 years later, that IT division, which I was no longer part of, I was over in the research foundation, was 250 people. So it's they went through massive growth, and frankly, those companies that are really scaling, the small, having their eyes on like the mid tier, those are our favorite clients to work with, so they're growing, they're trying to figure it out, they're honoring culture, and then you have people that come in from the very large companies. Well, this is how we do it, and say my old mother, J&J, this is how we did in J&J, which probably is not appropriate for a very small company. So you have dynamics like that, that they're always dealing with. But it's a fascinating space, these smaller, fast growing, innovative, especially like in rare disease, yeah.
For sure. Yeah. So, we touched on AI earlier, but I want to sort of circle back to this in terms of like AI driven drug development and the shifting regulatory frameworks around the world. How are these forces changing the advisory work that you do? And then, how are you helping clients prepare right now?
Yeah, it is. As different technologies come, there's always different challenges. And I always go back to the foundational organizational process stuff, even though it's AI, those don't change and they have to be further strengthened and strengthened, kind of cross functionally. And even there's AI, just the whole information architectures are fundamentally changing. The software providers are changing. AI is impacting the service providers, that serve, kind of life sciences and all that. And we track this stuff very closely in our benchmark, and we, track what people hope to have from a business benefit, and they're getting it. And we're very careful with our words, and at least in the regulatory context, it's very underwhelming, right now. But it's promising, also. So some of the things like with AI, you have, and I was talking with a client actually earlier today, one of the companies in the membership, and they're really struggling because everybody has to have an AI idea, and actually go to it. So some companies are getting really overwhelmed with, too many possibilities, right? Because I've never seen a technology until now that can be applied to all the different processes. You're usually picking on, kind of different areas, but it's across the board. And the interrelationship of saying non-clinical, clinical, regulatory safety, the supply chain folks, AI is looking at all that information, in real time. So a lot of it is how to stage gate and actually have thoughtful, schedule of projects and thinking about AI accuracy. Because I love the story is about a year ago, two CEOs, and one's like, we're going to AI everything. And they're creating a lot of extra work in the organization. And the other CEO was saying, look, we're going to be fully embracing AI, but the eye's not too intelligent right now. It will grow over time. So we want to be very thoughtful in how we deploy it, and how we do pilots. So sometimes it's as simple as that, some organizations, they believe they're being aggressive, and they're creating too much work for you. And this is where our benchmarks come in again, because some of our benchmarks, especially with the AI automation, there's 18 use cases that we track, and some are with all the generation of content, like clinical content, the CSR, safety content, labeling content, and a lot of other use cases, and kind of what we call the implementation tipping points, not till 2027, 28. Yet everybody feels they're behind, and I think there's some fatigue. But think about other breakthrough technologies, where there was a lot of hype, and we're a big believer in the Gartner hype cycle, and this is fitting like a glove. That, once you go into all these pilots, early implementations, it kind of goes down, and then you get to practical reality, and that's when the big stuff happens. So I think we're still about a year or two away from that. This train, it's on the tracks, it's a bullet train, but there's a little more time kind of in this experimental phase we're in, and that's where we help out companies. And companies use our benchmarks to say, look, we aren't behind, and some of the use cases we're doing, all our peers do. And when, again, getting back to size of company, we break all the AI use cases by size of companies because they're very different.
Yeah, I find it interesting because I mean, some of the companies that I deal with, right, um, the way that they implemented AI initially, I just didn't feel like it was not at all like the experience you were having outside of the pharmaceutical company. And I could only imagine on the research side, right? That's not where I was focusing at that period of time. But I mean, just the experience of AI internally, I remember telling people, I'm like, look, this is so handcuffed. It's not really worth, playing with. I mean, you just may as well sit and
Yeah.
wait for a minute until we figure this one out. And now I feel like they're closer. The one,
Yes.
where I get to experience this is a lot closer now inside of the pharmaceutical companies. But I mean, I was worried that, for a period of time, like, are we going to be so limited in the information you could feed the AI that at the end of the day that it isn't really producing valuable results. So then what value is it,
Yeah, and that's where it gets, I mean, we don't do these services, but it's, the AI guardrails. And then, certainly in regulatory, clinical, and a lot of the things, you have the whole compliance aspect of AI. And just like every other challenge, in life sciences, the last 20, 30 years, we're going to be figuring it out.
Mm,
So, but the technology, is a little ahead, of kind of the foundational stuff, and that'll catch up in the next, year or two. But it's definitely interesting times. And at the end of the day, we view, and we've had this view for 2 years, that AI is an assistant. It can be a writing assistant, it could be a research assistant, it can do amazing things. The one point that I don't like about AI, and I wish people could, change it, is this saying about human in the loop. It's very deep, humanizing. We talk about ourselves now in the third person. It's kind of strange, but we view it as an assistant, and it does, incredible things. And we need to have better guardrails.
yeah, yeah, for sure. So let's talk a little bit about RIM overall. So you've been involved in RIM program development from the ground up.
Yep.
What does a truly world-class regulatory information management program look like? And then how far is the average company from achieving that standard?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I actually have a few notes here, so I might look at it, because it's been quite the journey. And again, we did a first RIM benchmark before it was even a term, back in 2013. It's like, is RIM a corporate asset? We knew the answer is yes, for some of the reasons I explained before. So, and every benchmark we do peer comparisons, but there's never been a standard in regulatory for this. So we had 35 organizations and like 5 different design sessions back in 2015, fall of 2015. We're getting ready for our first world-class RIM survey in 2016. And there was two fundamental questions: is what is world-class in the management of all regulatory information globally? And more importantly, how do you measure it? So, and it's really that second question. And we got pretty close. The results of 2016 were interesting. We learned a lot, and by 2018, we had that standard down. Catherine Yang Ayotte, who, back in 2020, on the team, she created this performance pyramid, because we knew in our studies, we've done a lot since 2014, there's no correlation with our study top performers to any one software provider or system strategy. It's the strength, at the organizational process level, because we take even the market leading technology today, and in our scatter, kind of graph, we have companies that are our top performers and they have that software, and we have things that are bottom dwellers and they have that software too. So it comes to things that we know hold true, not only for regulatory, but for all divisions, right? Is data-driven continuous improvement? Do you have the right metrics that you're measuring? Because it's not the big transformation or the big modernization. You got to do that every 10, 15 years, but it's the incremental improvements in an organizational does, each and every year. So having a very strong metrics program. There is high, some companies have very high confidence in the data, quality in their systems. And because if the confidence isn't high, what do people do? We verify, 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 and it sucks the productivity out of the organization. So that correlates with really mature data governance, practices on that. We track business benefits, and those top performers outshine everybody else, very significantly. And also things like speed to information. Most of these top performers, their information is real time versus we're not sure if we can trust the information in the systems. We're going to verify, call that market, call the product team, call the people over in manufacturing. So those are some of the traits, and I think the last is high process maturity too. So again, we're back to a conversation about foundational capabilities that evolve and get strengthened, irregardless of the shiny object technology, kind of the year or two. Those are the things that separate, and it's been true with every study we've done over the last decade.
It's really important to understand, and I think in the same light, right? It'd be interesting to understand from your perspective, since you're global and the way that you look at things. Are there regulatory bodies that you're seeing, kind of lead the way, and then are there, ways that you think that some of the regulatory bodies could actually learn from others?
That's a really good question, and I would have answered it very differently. I was going to say 5 years ago, even 3 or 2 years ago. So it's our term, but let me give you the backdrop. The emergence of cloud-based regulatory spaces. So what that is, and like the two major, providers that are in that space are Cumulus Technologies and DNA Nexus. So what they're providing, just think about it. It's been life forever. You have these big submissions, you fire it off, to the health authority, but it's a one-to-one relationship, right? So now with these, and it's still early days, we think the big impact in the maturities, 3 to 5 years, and it's going to be very, very substantial. It's going to be a level playing field with the health authorities. So right now, if I wanted to get to 41 health authorities, I have to submit to each one of them. It could take weeks, it could take months, it could take quarters. So what's happening with these cloud-based regulatory spaces is everybody goes to one area. So one example, a Big Ten, company was doing some CMC work, the chemistry manufacturing, submitting that data. And they did it with 41 health authorities participating. So all 41, the researchers, they're looking at it. The amount of questions this company got back were a lot smaller. And once it got, approved, instead of taking 9, 12 months, or maybe 18 months to roll it out with all those markets, they got it done in like 4 months. So that's very substantial. So that's kind of point one, where I say it's an equalizer, or the experts that are in this space. You take like the continent of Africa, and it's starting to divide into kind of 4 regions, similar to what EMA is in the European Union. So they don't have all the advanced systems like EMA, the FDA, and China, Japan, and all that, but yet they can participate, in this cloud-based regulatory space. They need an internet connection, And then the other side, on the health authorities, these very, very talented reviewers, you can start leveraging their expertise, in different product areas. So again, these pilots started about 2 years ago. I was a little skeptical at first because this concept was tried about 10, 15 years ago and kind of crashed and burned, but it's happening and it's very exciting.
Wow, exciting for sure,
Yeah.
and I mean, good timing as well. I mean, especially, I mean, I heard on the news this morning that the occurrences of Ebola are,
Yeah.
continuing
It's
to
a little
grow,
scary.
right? Yeah, so you
Yes.
kind of think about, these sorts of things have an impact at the end of the day on care and the way that people
Yep.
get care. So, for sure, important.
Yes. Very important.
So, in terms of your journey, I mean, it's interesting to me because I started out just focusing on consulting, right? In 2020, I came out of industry and primarily, with the idea that, hey, look, I was going to primarily focus in on helping organizations scale, and then you kind of look at
Hmm.
what you've done, overall with your consulting firm, and I mean, first of all, big kudos to you for all of the great work that you guys are doing, and establishing this benchmarking survey isn't something that I think anybody really should look at lightly, right? I mean, there's some history here and
A
some
lot of
good
work.
data that you
Yeah.
have and a lot of work. How has your leadership philosophy evolved over the years as you've grown Gens and Associates?
Yeah, that's such a good question. We could spend an hour podcast just on leadership, on that, because it has so many different forms. And, two things kind of strike me on that question. And I think what we've been very successful at, and it wasn't the intention coming in, it just happened, and we understood what was happening, and we're really smart about it, is what we've accomplished is community-based leadership. And because when we first started the benchmark, I mean, this is 2005. Every company has their house consultants they're comfortable with. And around that time, these little small kind of independents, but they're banded together, these virtual networks of, independents. And, that was kind of fascinating. So the reason we did the benchmark was to differentiate ourselves from all the big consultancies and companies like Gartner and Forrester, because we got down at the operational level, and our insights and our data actually inform decisions, inform budgets, because you always have to check the box on strategy, about, well, what are our peers doing? And we did that. And people really liked it, and they asked us to do it every year, and we're like, well, we can't. We do it for free. We still do it for free. Anybody can participate. You get the full results. I mean, things are blinded. We have community debriefs and all that because it's about community learning. And the community is actually growing. In our community, we call it the regulatory ecosystem. It's just not industry. It's the service providers, software providers. They're all clients. Occasionally, we're debriefing some of the health authorities, so they understand fundamentally what's going. They know what's going on in industry today, but where is it going to be in 3 or 4 years? So I think that's community leadership, and it's something that we've earned. We try to get better each time. We do a study. You never sit on your laurels. And I think the second point gets if it's external, leadership like community based or even internal is earning trust. Trust is critical. It doesn't matter if it's internal leadership or external. Are people going to trust you, even if you're having hard conversations with them and what's in their best interest? If you don't have that layer of trust, it's hard. So that's what comes to mind. Community-based, leadership. It's a lot of responsibility because we're right in the middle of it, but it's also an honor, and we enjoy it and we don't take it for granted.
I appreciate you sharing that. What's the greatest piece of leadership advice you've ever received?
Oh wow, there's been a lot, having great mentors along the way. But one thing, and I go back to my Janssen days on this because I went through one of those rotations and I had to go in. Actually, was the president of the company, and reputation is he was pretty rough. And I was asking for a lot of money because the predecessor kind of messed something up, so it was going to cost him a lot. I was really nervous, and my boss at the time, he was my mentor, and said, "Look, Steve, treat everybody as an individual first. They're choosing, so it doesn't matter if it's a CEO, a group chairman, a clinician, the person on the manufacturing line, the clerk in finance that does accounts receivable. Just treat them all as individuals, first, understand their story. They made a choice to do that in a job, and it doesn't matter if you're way up here or different in the hierarchy, that, there's different challenges, stress points. So that was really, really valuable, advice. And it helped me kind of navigate as opposed to every company has a hierarchy. And then in some cultures, around the world, you have to really be explicit and honor that, but you can manage up, you can manage down, sideways, you get managed. So I thought instead of thinking about people and titles and all that, they're all colleagues.
Mm.
Everybody's a colleague, irregardless. And that made a huge difference. And I usually give that piece of advice to a lot of people too. It just it helps to reorient you how you work with everybody every day, you know.
Also true. What inspires you?
Oh, the thing I love is you get a high performance team that does amazing things, and I just love to like, okay, what's that story? There's a story there, and where people have breakthrough thinking, and I just love it, kind of teams that just break through and do amazing things.
Yeah, absolutely. So, what concerns you?
Today, I mean, I hit it on a little bit of the AI, and it's just not only kind of guardrails, but kind of as a father, too, and in our family, we're really big and supportive of the whole educational system. Is that with AI becoming rampant, are we starting to lose critical thinking? So that's something we think about. And there's a lot of friends and family that are kind of in the educational sector. And certainly with things going on in the States, it's certainly not true in other kind of regions or countries of the world. The inequality of healthcare access. So those are kind of two big ones here.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think that, I mean, I've said this to family members as well, that I feel like the number one skill that all of our kids and grandkids and maybe who knows, maybe even their kids will have to have is the ability to critically think and judge the
Yeah.
output of what they're handed versus just accepting everything as fact, which is,
Yep.
not the generation that we grew up in, right? I mean, you and I grew up in a
Yeah.
world where, hey, look,
Write that report.
yeah, write that report, the written word and the sort of references that are provided are the things that kind of, show you whether or not if something is substantiated or not. And now you have to kind of question that because where where did those other sources come from? So, yeah,
Yeah, I mean, I say kids, they're adult, adult, two professions, very different professions. And we were just talking the other day, and especially my daughter was saying she's in healthcare too. We have healthcare all throughout her family, but she's in the policy side, the healthcare policy side. So her firm that does research, and also policy stuff, sometimes they get researched by a third party. So she said, "Yeah, I got this report and you could tell AI generated, and it's like, you got to be kidding me, Nobody took the time to proof it. Now you could, again, AI could be that assistant, to bring this, but that critical thinking was missing, and you could tell it was somebody typed in something into Chat GPT, So here we go.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. There you go. Last question: what excites you?
Oh, in the life sciences space, it's really incredible in the last 2 or 3 years. Because think about, 10, 15 years ago, the concept of personalized medicine. It's like, okay, that's interesting, right? But we're seeing it happen, with so many rare disease, generation, just everything that's going on, and where it's starting to personalize instead of you're building a product, for 100 million, you could be building a product for 20. So all these kind of unmet needs, and having the technology, the scientists, I mean, AI starting to play a role in that. It's a really amazing time to be in life sciences, and especially I love those rare disease companies. It's incredible what they're doing. So that gets me excited. Anytime I have a chance to have a meeting or do some work with a company like that, I just love it because I'm constantly learning kind of what they're doing, and it's really amazing in a relatively short period of time where we're starting to see those results.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Steve Jens, thank you so much for being on the Life Science Success Podcast. I greatly appreciate you being here and for telling us about, everything that you're doing in this space. I mean, for sure, this is an area that I continue to see, a lot of advancements in, and I would imagine we're going to
Yep.
continue to see this in the foreseeable future as well. Where can people get in touch with you? Where can people, find out more about you and your company?
Well, if you just Google gensandassociates.com, you'll come to our, kind of a website, contact information. And I'm one of those LinkedIn guys. I don't do social media, but I do LinkedIn and Strava, for my mountain biking. So you can just go to LinkedIn. Gens is very, rare name. So Gens, just, put in Steve Gens, you'll get my LinkedIn profile, send me a message.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for being on. I really appreciated you being here.
Yeah, thanks so much, Don. It was a joy and a pleasure, to be part of your podcast. So thank you so much.
Thanks a lot.